I'm here with Jens Bogren to talk about URM Academy and their latest course, How It's Done. Thank you very much for taking the time today to join me on the channel to talk about the course, the academy, yourself, your work. So I just want to start off by saying thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So give us a little bit, for those that are not familiar with the academy, even before we talk about the course, what is the URM Academy?
That's a good question. URM Academy is like the biggest educational initiative network for aspiring metal producers. This is mostly about like heavy music, I would say. So I've been on there before. They have these sort of like nail the mix, it's called, where producers such as myself would be mixing a song from start to finish. I've been doing them for like Opeth, for example, and Eamon Amarth, Septic Flesh, where I've basically been doing like a 10-hour long session of mixing the song while answering questions. So that's like their big subscription thing. And then they have these little bit more advanced things like this one. It's called How It's Done, which is basically, I think in my case, it's like 35 hours of video and even like a book in there where you get to follow the process of me producing a song, in this case with the artist Ishan, from the very like pre-production and demo stage all the way to a finished master. So we basically we filmed for like 10 days, I think, like 18 hours a day. So it was like a crazy intense session. We did 3 songs, and one of them is included in this course where we went like really in depth into all the parts.
Was it difficult to develop this course idea, to put everything together, or it was more difficult in terms of the length of the process?
That's a good question. I mean, I have never done anything like this before, and the URM guys had their director and their project leader. So I sort of just went in and did my thing, and it was not like in any constructed sort of way. I just did the production like I do it, right? And they were acting like the fly on the wall with their cameras and stuff. And then we did a bunch of interviews in between where I got more in depth, talking to the camera about how and why, etc., for all sorts of details and questions that was asked by the director for this.
Did they approach you with this idea, or is this something that you had in the back of your mind that you would have liked to have done?
No, this was them approaching me. They have done these sort of How It's Done in the past, a few of them, I believe. The previous one was with Howard Benson, for example. But this was the biggest one. I think the previous one they did was like 8 hours or something of video material, and this became just crazy long. I guess it's because I talk too much.
I was just going to say maybe you talk too much.
Yeah, no, but I really wanted it to be like they sell it as this thing where it's how it's done, like where you see everything, and if you want to see everything, that's how long it takes, if you don't do shortcuts. I've also have a little bit of an educational background. Back in the day I used to teach some classes at the music university in Örebro, where I'm from. So I guess it comes fairly natural for me, the educational side of things and explaining and talking, and then yeah, it just takes some time.
Is a course like this designed for beginners or designed for folks that already are doing it? They just kind of want to improve on certain areas.
I would say both. If you're new to coming into production, then it's, I mean, if I would see myself as an aspiring producer, it's like a gold mine. There was nothing like that when I started out.
Yeah.
There was hardly internet. And you read some books, and you tried to maybe reach for some forum ideas, or maybe you had a mentor, that kind of thing. But to actually be able to see it like this, there was nothing like that. So that would be excellent. And of course, if for myself, like in my position today, doing this professionally for over 20 years, if I had the opportunity to watch the course like this, it would be really like interesting to see how others like may approach certain type of problems and the psychology they use for against the artist, for example, which can be very different depending on the artist, I should say. But that's also a big thing. It's not about like technicality. It's the thing with music production is that it's so like cross scientific, so to speak. It's the whole like sound thing and the science behind, and then there's the art thing. It's like you really have to have both your halves of the brain active when you produce music, because it's art and it's technical at the same time. So it's yeah, I guess that's why I enjoy doing it.
So you said like there was barely internet when you got started, and a course like this would have definitely been helpful. So with barely having internet and not having a course like this, how did you develop your own personal skills?
Long by doing it, I guess, over time. I mixed my first album back in '96, um, when I was still like in school. So I did go to school I had this like really good media school, which was not university level. It was age 16 through 18, where I had access to a really, really good studio. And that school was amazing teachers. And I played in bands, and I found out that the best thing in the world was being in the studio with my bands and recording our demos. And that's how I got really into that. So after school, I immediately formed my company and started to work with local bands, and it was just everything I was doing. And at the time, we're talking like second half of '90s, albums were not sounding that great, to be honest, when it comes to to metal. At least there was really good pop stuff, and some rock, but the metal was perhaps not that developed. So it was in that way a little bit easier to get into it, because if you were a little bit of a nerd like I was, and you started to you know find out and do it all day long, you realize that you could reach pretty good results pretty early on. Like already the first couple of albums that I mixed was sort of sounding okay for the time being. And from then, I've just been doing it. Like I remember when I started Fascination Street Studios, that was in 2001. Um, I was working, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. It was just everything I did was being in the studio. And I had some luck. I had this guy, Don Svaner, that had this band Edge of Sanity. I don't know if you know that thing. And I did not know at the time. I did not know that he was the producer of like Opeth and Catatonia and stuff. I did not know these bands at that time. And he heard some stuff that I did, and he recommended Catatonia to work with me. So I got a little bit lucky there in terms of I had the opportunity to grow my skills, and then I got the opportunity to work with a band that was internationally recognized, and they sort of grow from that point as well. And they were friends with Opeth. So first I got to do Bloodbath because Don was in Bloodbath as well, and the Catatonia guys, and um, then they sort of were happy with the experience and recommended me to Opeth, and that's sort of where my own career took off, basically. So from that moment, or yeah, I don't know, ever since 2001, I suppose I've been just super busy because I was able to have the luck, the timing, and the talent sort of combined. It's those three elements that is needed for this business. I would say.
Yeah, I was going to say those three are very important. They're all part of the same kind of recipe.
Yeah.
When you were putting this training session together, were you then involved in the after process of editing and finalizing it in order for you to feel like what you created is exactly what a producer would want to see or an aspiring producer wanted to see?
No, I have not, and I guess that's because I'm not involved in URM, the company, as such. But these guys are great. I mean, I really trust them. Like Ale, that is the one of the heads over there. He's been a producer himself for many years, as well as he's a very skilled musician. And the director there, Nick, is also very, very good to work with. So I trust these guys 100%. They of course, showed me stuff from it, but I haven't dug through all those hours myself yet. But like I said, if there would be any team that I would be able to trust, it's those guys. The URM guys has been like amazing throughout the years.
What has the response been so far from your standpoint for this course?
You mean from the audience
Yeah,
or
yeah, from fans, from folks that follow you, because I know you've been posting about it on your social media and you've been talking about it. So, have you gotten positive feedback from it?
Yeah, absolutely. So far, there's just the first segment that is released. It's the way it works is that people sign up at this point, and then the sale of this course ends July 12th, and I think that's when the rest of the course opens. So it's like an interactive thing as well, where I will be involved in like Q&A sessions and stuff. So it's not just here you get a box of DVDs. It's actually an interactive thing as well, where you can engage with others in this community that gets the course. And then you will keep that, but it's a little different than just your ordinary course DVD that you would get, so to speak.
Mhm.
So far, people seem very excited about how detailed this thing is, but people have not seen the better part of it yet.
When a band approaches you about working with you on a record, what's the first thing you tell a band, specifically a band that you have never worked with before?
Change your strings? No. That's a good question. I guess that depends, you know. I don't think there is like a formula that fits everything. That's also one of the exciting parts about music production. No band is the other alike. You know, they might sound sometimes alike, but um, for example, some bands are very, very interested in me getting involved in their songwriting and song structures, selecting songs, all of that kind of thing. Whilst other bands are more interested just about the sound, because they might not want to have they don't want any input on their songs, and then there are all sorts of artists in between there. Some are super excited, some are very experienced and very relaxed. Others are more, nervous and edgy because it might be one of their first times in the studio. It's just so whatever the person and the situation calls for would sort of define how I take that on to begin with. But yeah, it also depends. Sometimes the artist comes to me directly and we work something out, and they have a label, or they might be doing their own production company, for example. So they basically pay for it themselves and own their master. Sometimes it would be a label that approaches me about doing a band, and then I would start talking to the band after things are settled, basically. So it's that could be different.
You mentioned before that your career, there's a little bit of a percentage of luck there that somebody introduced you to the right people and that kind of got things started. So obviously they saw something great in you and the work that you do that made them put you forward. So from that point of view, if you're looking at somebody now and you were that person introducing somebody else to a band, what makes that person that you're introducing a good producer?
That's a good question. Um, I guess it's about. I mean, it's skills and personality. It depends a little bit, right? If it's just someone that would be mixing something, personality might not be so important because then it's like a little bit more of a technical job. Even though, of course, it's creative, it's still, you know, limited time that you spend with the artist, especially these days. Back in the day, you always had the band, you know, behind you when you mixed an album. These days, it's almost always remote. They might come in at the end of the session, but otherwise, it's remote. So then you can be whatever, you know, how introvert you want, basically. But if it comes to actually producing, then I would say the personality is very important. And I've noticed that a lot of like really good producers are usually very, very friendly people, and that could have played a big part in why they were able to get ahead, so to speak, because they were, you know, people enjoyed working with them. Sometimes it's not the the quality of the production that is the most important factor. Sometimes it could actually be about people having a good experience or whatever. And hopefully, if you can get all that together, you know, making people enjoy themselves, making them perform at their peak without that could, you know, introduce some friction sometimes. And at the same time be able to deliver on what people usually talk about when they define a production. They talk about the sound, right? Even though there's so much more that goes into a production. If you can get all these things to fall into place, that will make you a good producer.
Is it difficult to be Jens? Is it difficult to live up with the expectations that you're a legendary producer in the world of metal? You know, like some of the best records out there have your name and your stamp on it. Does that set the bar so high that it becomes hard to be who you are?
I don't. I've never thought about it that way. It's I just do what I do, I suppose. But okay, yeah. Sometimes I guess I could like listen back to something and it feels like I have to beat myself, you know, in terms of like not beat myself, but I have to do better than I did last time. Uh, but that's a nice competition to have with yourself, I suppose. But I think it's gotten easier and easier because these days people usually, you know, they come with me with confidence and they trust what I'm doing, and that makes my job much easier in a way.
Folks signing up to this course are definitely doing it because of who you are and the track record that you have. So they look up to you from that standpoint. Is there someone maybe in the past or in the present that you personally look up to as well?
No, yes, there are, but to be honest, I don't. I mentioned that I did not know about these bands when I met Don Svanö. I never heard about Catatonia and Opeth, for example, because I don't really come from that side of music. I was more into like post punk and like little gothic stuff. Catatonia could be argued, of course, being on that scale as well. But yeah, I wasn't really into metal and extreme metal when I started out. So I had my I have learned that through through my job, so to speak. These days, of course, you know, there's nothing that is too extreme for me, or I enjoy working with all these kind of things, and I've learned a lot over those 20 plus years in the scene as well. But um, I would say that um, yeah, when it comes to inspiration, I think I have got more inspiration from like rock producers and pop producers. For example, um, Tim Palmer is a producer that I enjoyed a lot. He did some of the Mission albums that I grew up listening to, and I always thought they were sounding so good. Um, and He also did In Absentia with Porcupine Tree, for example. It's
Oh,
like also one of these statements where you see that suddenly a band sounds much better than they have been doing both before and after. Sorry, Stephen. And that's one of those producers that I've been, checking out a little extra. And some of the American mixers pretty early on, like Tom Lordell and Chris Lordell, really, really good American mixers for a more of a rock sound. And I think I've had that in my scope more than the like typical metal producers
okay.
that I usually found to be a little bit more on the stale and clinical side, maybe, that I didn't enjoy too much myself. But there are some good ones, of course, some which I'm good friends with as well.
Well, when you listen to music, do you listen to music as a music lover, or do you listen to music with your producer years and you constantly nitpicking at other people's work?
Yeah, that's also a good question. I would say like this. Uh, One of the big like sorrows that I have about doing what I do is that it has destroyed my love for music in a way. I mean, I love music, of course, but I used to be a fan, and I bought all the albums with the artists that I loved, and I listened to them all the time. Learned all the lyrics, found all the videos. This was before the age of where you knew what your favorite artist is eating for lunch every day.
And
When you had to
breakfast.
like,
Let's not
yeah,
forget the breakfast.
exactly, there was a magic in the air, and you had to like hunt for information, and there was rumors, and it's like it was cool. But so that's sad because now I sit here and I listen to. I don't do the 15 hours a day anymore usually, even though I actually had been doing that lately. But let's say I do like 8 or 10 hours a day listening to metal. When I come home, I just want silence, or whatever my kids play. That would be what I listen to. So every time I have a little longer holiday, I would sort of rediscover music in a way. I need like 2 weeks complete silence, and then it's like, maybe I should listen to this album and this album. So that's a little sad. And when I do listen to other stuff, of course, I mean, I can think about these things, but mostly in an enjoyable way. It's like, that's a cool production. I would never think about doing it like that, for example. So I can sort of, find inspiration in some things. And I can also enjoy these like big albums from um, early 2000, when before Napster crash happened and the budgets were still really big. And you listen to albums with yeah, it could be whatever, but big artists, or it could be Limp Bizkit. I can't say that I enjoy their music, but some of those productions are insane. It's like you don't do it that way anymore. And same with bands that I listen to, like or artists like Tori Amos, for example. Some really, really cool productions there in the end of 90s. Um, so yeah, I can listen and I can nitpick, but I'm not one of those who would like listen and criticize. I just enjoy it. Try to think through the production when I enjoy music.
One last question for you, and I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you what's your favorite album that you ever produced, but I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you what's your favorite album production-wise that you didn't produce?
Hmm. Um. Yeah. Good question. But just to make it easy for myself, let's say In Absentia then with the Porcupine Tree, which is hard to connect. But I think that's one of those albums where music and production comes together like in a perfect symbiose. There's the first Porcupine Tree album with Gavin Harrison as well on drums, for example, and his drumming there really comes through in a way um, that sets a sort of a trademark for that, or distinctive sound for that album. So yeah, I could list 23 albums here, but let's just stick with that one.
Stick with that one. All right, Jens, thank you very much for your time today. It was an absolute pleasure, a blast, an honor to have you on the channel to talk about production, to talk about how it's done, course that's coming up. So thank you once again for taking the time to sit down with me and chat.
No problem, man. Anytime. Thank you.
Take care. All the best.
Take care. Bye bye.